Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. At the start of January, the US-based Centre for Peace Communications released a series of riveting insider accounts of what they say life is like under Hamas in Gaza, with multiple media outlets picking up the content. Joseph Braude, the president of the centre, joins us today to discuss the ongoing project, how they've come to acquire such stark stories, and what's to come next for others under Iran-sponsored militia. Mr. Braude, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. Now, journalists have reported on many accounts of the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Why was it so important for you to allow everyday people there the chance to be able to reach a global audience like this? And frankly speaking, why should anyone believe a US-based centre's word for it?
Well, we thought it was important because so many Gazans are prevented from expressing themselves, are forbidden to say anything that does not comport with the ideological views of Hamas. There have been a lot of attempts by Gazans on their own, acting with great courage to contact the outside world through social media and so on, that have come to naught because Hamas suppresses them. So we wanted to find a creative way to build a platform for them. We found a way to do it using technology and animation and so on. And to your question about the sort of authenticity of the interviews, we took the trouble to show them to several newspapers of record, one of which is Arab News. They watched all of the footage from which we drew these videos and confirmed in their own reporting that the material is authentic.
With the tight communication blockade placed by Hamas on Gaza, what criteria did your centre follow while selecting those 25 speakers? How do we know that what you are reporting is actually true?
So first of all, alongside the videos themselves, we published in all of the outlets with which we partnered, and there are 5 of them, and the material was released in 7 languages. We published research that cites the largest human rights organizations in the world, multiple Palestinian opinion survey groups, and reportage that documents the nature of the incidents that are being described is very widespread in Gaza. The stories of flight by sea, the stories of racketeering and shaking down of small-time merchants by Hamas, and so on. So these are widespread phenomena. And what you're seeing, including the opinions that are being described, are wholly in line with the findings of all of those polls and journalists and human rights investigators that do their work.
Do you feel like this is the first truly accurate account of life in Gaza? Surely there must be those who are living a very comfortable life and, frankly, reaping the benefits of serving Iran's agenda.
Indeed, that is part of the story that emerges, that while the majority of Gazans are denied access to the aid and support that comes in from multiple sources in the world, the Hamas leadership and their families and the small circle of elites that surround them are living in the lap of luxury. And that's something that is a recurring theme in this testimony. So yeah, it's not bad to live in Gaza if you are a stalwart of Hamas, particularly on the leadership level.
So how did you persuade speakers to come forward? And did they have any concerns about going on record, especially since Hamas in 2019 branded protesters there as traitors?
Yes. So indeed, some of the speakers, by their own accounts, as you see in the video, previously were jailed by Hamas for doing exactly what they were doing when they spoke to us, trying to tell their stories to the outside world. So they were very brave. We committed to them that we would not show their faces and that we would technologically alter their voices so that there would be a measure of anonymity provided to them. So on the one hand, the stories are being told without their faces shown, which they might have done in the past. On the other hand, they're reaching a much larger audience because the tragedy of this communications blockade by Hamas is they've been successful in taking down content that Gazans attempt to put up. But here we've built a substantial distribution channel on 4 continents. And the material is everywhere, it proliferates, and it's impossible to take it down, even though Hamas has tried.
Well, you've outlined it a little bit there, obviously talking about the cartoons and altering their voice there, but I'd be very interested to understand, building on that, what steps did your centre also take to protect the participants? What kind of precautionary measures did you put in place in order to avoid jeopardising their safety?
Well, the part of protecting the process and doing the best we can in terms of safety and discretion is not to get into all of the details of precisely how we did this, except to say that we worked very hard, we gave it a lot of thought, and we did our best to make sure that the project went as smoothly and safely as possible.
So were there any participants who changed their minds about having their accounts included before the project actually launched?
None. Everybody wanted to be heard. It was almost uncanny that so many, I would say the majority of the interviewees, when we thanked them for doing the interviews, responded with a version of the same retort, which was, "I only hope my voice will be heard." These people feel that they've been silenced, that they're under a communications blockade, and they want these stories to get out.
So 25 speakers in total. Have any of them faced any threats since telling you their stories or since the project has launched?
We aren't responding to questions about the situations of any individuals at this time, but we are doing everything we can to monitor the situation and address issues as they come up. I will note that there are no reports of such outcomes at this time.
Well, certainly we know there has been some upset. Earlier this week, you retweeted a comment from the organisation you work with, the Centre for Peace Communications, stating, and I quote, "Days after we launched a platform for ordinary Palestinians to expose Hamas abuses, it was swarmed by pro-Hamas accounts. Row upon row of pro-Hamas attacks, all identical, posted simultaneously." So have these attempts managed to silence your campaign at all or reduce its impact?
I think actually the opposite has happened. First of all, what does this show, Katie? It shows that Hamas doesn't want these voices to be heard. It's just another way, essentially, that the freedom of the repression of free expression that they're imposing internally, they're now attempting to globalize and actually suppress global free expression. And I think what it shows is that they don't want the truth to come out. Now, we thank God that our defenses, such as they are for the time being, were adequate to prevent them from blocking our distribution platforms. So as you can see, the material does continue to be available around the world. And we will continue to do our best, obviously, to keep it out there. And the more time goes by, the more it proliferates, and the cat is out of the bag. So there's really nothing much to be done about that.
And are you getting attacks from these pro-Hamas accounts on a daily basis? Is it more or less than that?
Well, I don't know what the value of that type of information is at this time, except to say that we are doing the best we can as a nonprofit organization to keep the ship running smoothly and proceed with our plans. And we pray for success, and we're grateful for all of the people who have been stepping in along the way to advise us, to help us. and to try to see this through.
Now, you are an Iraqi Jewish American. Have you personally faced any personal threats from any pro-Hamas or pro-Iranian accounts so far?
Yeah. So again, I think the real issue is the insecurity that the elements you mentioned, Iran, Hamas, other proxies of Iran, and so on, are posing to the entire region, Katie. I mean, everybody is in danger from these groups. They are persecuted, and the first victims are the people who live under their rule. That's why you're seeing it in Iran, you're seeing it in Gaza now. People want something different. They want a better future. They want security as well and stability. So we're just, drawing attention to these realities, stories that haven't been heard before. And I think that, we'll continue to do the best we can, and as others surely will as well.
But have you personally faced any of these attacks, or is that something that you're not able to discuss at this time?
I don't even really know how to describe a situation that is so broad. There's so many people who are endangered by this, by Iran's attempts to maintain its dominance, both of its own country and of large portions of the region. That it's a matter of the entire world coming together to say enough. You've done this enough. How about giving someone else an opportunity to build a better region?
Well, you spoke there of the world coming together to take action. In what ways can initiatives like Whispered in Gaza make to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? Do you expect governments or global bodies to take action after seeing this, if at all?
I believe that we are making a positive contribution by getting testimony of Gazans to the world, because it gives policymakers, leaders, and so on, a new vocabulary, as one person who watched it put it, a new way of thinking about the realities, more and greater understanding of what people want in Gaza, how people feel about those who control their strip. And I believe that's to the good. I mean, we're seeing now people calling for new creative ways of thinking about how to empower the many Gazans who want a different future. Are there ways to engage them as we have, but to do it, on a larger scale, to take full advantage of the tools that the 21st century has brought to the world, enable educational conditions to improve, information to travel more freely, and not to wait until the ongoing military stalemate is resolved, as there's no end in sight, to find answers now, to find steps that can be taken now. And so we hope we're starting a new conversation. We're heartened by the fact that a lot of people are watching the content and beginning to talk about it. And time will tell how creative the world's leaders turn out to be in terms of addressing the situation in Gaza.
Well, you're calling for the conversation to continue, but frankly, we've seen a conversation for quite a long time. So do you think you're being fair with your approach, particularly when we consider a number of Palestinian minors, often mere schoolboys, being taken to Israeli jails? There's been the killing of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, as well as the continued illegal occupation of Palestinian lands. So do you condemn all of that?
So in representing the testimony that we have brought forth through this project, what we see coming out of it is a very interesting range of views about the issues you raised. So a couple of examples. The first is that there are quite a few people in this series who say forthrightly that they were in favor of the first and the second intifadas, but fault Hamas for going on to start wars with Israel that it could not win, and then hide in bunkers and leave civilians to suffer the casualties. Other voices, there's a very interesting video by a young man who said, "Don't impose on me how to resist. And what he was saying was that Hamas, by launching wars, provoking reactions that cause civilian casualties, but leave the cause unaffected and do not advance the Palestinian cause, is forcing people to go by its playbook, whereas this young man feels that there are better ways to protest Israel than the choice and course of action that Hamas has taken. And he says that he's an oud player. That's an ancient Middle Eastern string instrument. And maybe he wants to, as he put it, to resist Israel through his oud. In other words, he's saying that perhaps nonviolent protest could actually be more effective than the self-defeating measures that Hamas has chosen. On the other hand, there are people who are calling for engagement with Israelis for a variety of reasons. In some cases, it's a sense that we need to actually connect in order to recognize our common humanity, and that's a part of settling a conflict that cannot be settled through weapons. And others look at it pragmatically and say, look, we want to rebuild the Strip. In order to do that, we need to engage multiple parties in the international community and Israel as well. So there's a range here. And I think that it's the information monopoly of Hamas that makes it look like 1.8 million people all think exactly the same thing. And what we're showing is it's as diverse as any human society. And Gazans have a lot of interesting ideas about the issues that affect them directly and a range of other issues as well.
But can conversations simply be enough to ignite real action, particularly when we see UN figures show recently that 2022 was one of the deadliest years in history for the ongoing conflict? We've seen a new government come to power, and yet the illegal occupation continues. We saw quite a controversial visit on January the 3rd by the new Minister for National Security to the holy sites of Jerusalem. And we continue to see violence from both sides. Is a conversation really going to be enough to change that today?
Absolutely, I think it's possible. I mean, that's obviously why we do what we do. The fact that it took this long for someone to find a way to open a platform for Gazans to express themselves reflects, I think, the need for creative thinking. And we hope that this will open the door to more initiatives by larger organizations than ours, because we're showing what is possible. And of course, I believe that nonviolent expression is ultimately the most powerful tool that humanity has in order to advance justice, peace, and the well-being of all peoples. Of course, I believe that.
Well, finally, we've seen months of protests in Iran without these protests achieving much in terms of toppling the regime. So you've outlined it a little bit there, but what realistically are you hoping to achieve with this project? Because even if your campaign was successful in changing the perceptions of normal Palestinians living under Hamas, what choice do they really have?
There are no immediate solutions for the tragedy that is being portrayed here. And we're under no illusions about that. We're not suggesting that there's any sort of a silver bullet to defeat extremism, to end stale forms of thinking, and so on. I think that at most, we achieve a ripple effect that, as I've said, affects the vocabulary of the discussion, that stimulates new forms of creative thinking by multiple parties and elements within, without, and so on. And perhaps embolden Gazans also to recognize that their desire to be heard is a reasonable one and an achievable one. And for them to continue to persevere as we and others on the outside continue to persevere. And so we're a little bit idealistic, but we're also pragmatic because we've shown that something people thought couldn't be done can be done. And it ups the ante to others to launch their own initiatives next.
Well, certainly a really fascinating initiative. I have to ask, can we expect a part 4 of the series anytime soon?
It is only the beginning of an ongoing project. I mean, obviously, there were a number of things that we did before this, and there are going to be quite a few that we do afterwards. Whenever we launch an initiative, Katie, we take time and we look at what it achieved. We try to draw lessons, and to innovate, always to build on successes and learn from whatever lessons emerge. So that's what we're looking at like right now, and of course we're going to do more.
Well, certainly a fascinating project. Mr. Joseph Braude, the president of the US-based Center for Peace Communications. Thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. We appreciate your time.